Hi, welcome to episode 1 of my podcast. I'm calling it the Chetairliner podcast because I think that's funny. That is subject to change. My name is Chet. I will be on every episode of this podcast, and I will, as often as possible, have guests, probably people I know, on with me. But for now, I'm getting started, and I'm doing this on my own. I've considered doing this here and there over the years. A few people here and there have suggested that I do something like this, but I never really knew if I were to actually do something like this, what would it be about? And I still don't really know, but I just feel like I just have to do something. And if I get some momentum, things will fall into place. At least that's my hope. So for now, I'm going to try to make this relatively short, for the sake of just doing something. Not overthinking it. The focus of the podcast, at least out the gate, will be to talk about a single thing. And for now, I'll do that by myself. In the future, I would love to have people have conversations about a single thing or a single topic. And by thing, I mean a piece of media, more or less, that I'd like to talk about a book or a movie or an album, music that has had an impact on me. And I will select things that I assume many people haven't experienced. So I'm not going to do Led Zeppelin's 4th album. I'm not going to talk about Star Wars. It's not that something has to be obscure necessarily, because it's not about that, but I just want this to be useful and of value. And when someone turns me on to something that I end up liking a lot, I'm just so grateful for that. So I want to look back at several of those things that I really circumstantially was exposed to that had a lasting impact on me. That's what we're going to do. I'm doing this in large part for myself. And I think that's a good thing, in a way. But I will try to make it as interesting as possible for other people. So when I say I'm doing this for myself, I mean that I want to improve my ability to speak intentionally about something. Beyond that, I want to build a skill set of being able to edit audio on a computer, because that's what you got to do this. And I've not really put any work into knowing how to do that for a very long time. Really not since high school, I would say. And a lot has changed since then. So we'll see where this goes. To anyone listening right now, thank you for giving this a shot, for checking this out. I'm not going to ramble too long so that you don't regret checking it out. In the future, of course, there'll be more to say at the outset. But for now, I'd rather just keep it brief. I don't think there's a lot I need to say. Like I said, if you're listening to this in the year 2023, it's almost certain that you know me so I don't need to really go much out of my way to explain who I am. I would like to talk later in future episodes about my life, or at least some of the more interesting parts of it, but I don't want it to be about me, because that well will run dry in short order. So the music you hear under here is my own, that I made tonight. I intend to make original music for every episode, and I will put all this music in a Google Drive folder. I'll talk more about that later, I think, maybe at the end. In the interest of time, and in the interest of not being boring right away, I am going to end this intro and move along to the main part of the episode, where I will talk about a specific thing. I want to talk about Rabbits. Rabbits is a podcast that has 2 seasons, as well as 2 published novels at the time of this recording. In the interest of a dispassionate overview, I asked an AI bot to summarize the podcast, and here's what it said. Rabbits is a pseudo-documentary podcast from producer and writer Terry Miles. It follows the story of Carly Parker, a woman who searches for her missing best friend Yumiko and finds herself in the midst of a decades-old alternative reality game known as Rabbits, or simply The Game. Rabbits is a complex and ambitious podcast that blends elements of mystery, science fiction, and horror. It is also a deeply personal story about friendship, loss, and a search for meaning. The podcast has been praised for its immersive storytelling, its rich and complex mythology, and its chilling atmosphere. It's also been credited with helping to popularize the genre of pseudo-documentary podcasts. And there ends the AI-generated summary. So, Rabbits. I feel like I remember the day when I found it. Not that I know the exact date, but I remember when I first started listening to it, how quickly I was struck by how unique it felt, how interesting it was, and how certain I was that I'm gonna like this thing. When things are impactful that I'm listening to, the memories sometimes are very photographic. So I can remember where I was when I first started to listen to it, when I just first checked it out, like, let's see what this is all about. And I can still remember to this day. So I was just struck about how much this felt like it was made exactly for me. And years later, I'm here to report that I was right. I discovered Rabbits randomly. The podcast app that I've used the most over the years is called Pocket Casts. It's not perfect, but it's just what I settled on, I guess. And it has a Discover tab where it suggests things. Rabbits was there, and the thumbnail is what caught my eye. A really cool drawing of a rabbit's head on a brown background. I checked it out, and I was hooked. The thumbnail looks relatively the same at this point. The background's blue, but as of the time of this recording, it really hasn't changed much. It was still new at the time, so I was able to listen to a few episodes back to back, but then I had to wait from there on out for new ones to be released. And I think it was every 2 weeks or so that something came out. Maybe weekly, maybe. The story in the first season eventually concluded, and that was it for a while. I dove into other offerings from that creative team, the people that produced Rabbits, but after a while there was an effort on their part to crowdsource the funds to make a second season of Rabbits. I can't remember if it was Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but it was something like that. It didn't reach its funding goal, and things went quiet for a while, which was okay because I was interested and enjoying the other series and podcasts from the Public Radio Alliance. That's the umbrella that a lot of this is under. Eventually, a second season did come out. I think it was on Stitcher Premium. I must have done a free trial, but eventually it went on to a regular podcast feed anyway, and it was there for all the world to check out. And it was great. I'm not going to go into any details about the second season because even saying what it's about or who is in it or who isn't in it, character-wise, might have spoilery implications for the first season. I should say, with anything I'm going to talk about, besides music or something like that, anything that could be spoiled, I'm not going to, because I'm going to try to focus on talking about things that many people haven't heard of. And I mean, so the whole point here is to encourage people to check something out that's new. And so the last thing I want to do is spoil it. Sometime later, the first novel was published, and it's called Rabbits. It works just fine as a standalone book. Certainly there's no prerequisite to listen to any of the podcast before you read the book. The uninitiated can read that book, and they will most likely not feel like they're missing something, like there's a broader context that's just speculation, because that was not my experience. So I hit the ground running with the book, and I loved it. I think it's a great book. I recommend the book to anyone, really. But I can say about my own experience that reading that book, having listened to the podcast in its entirety, was a lot of fun and very satisfying. And just this month, October 2023, we have seen the release of the second novel, The Quiet Room. I finished this book the other day, and I do have mixed feelings about it, but overall I found it satisfying, and I will, without a doubt, continue to buy future books that come out in this series. I don't want to nitpick it because I just finished it, and I do think it's a good book. It feels like at this point any qualms I have are, I just don't want to give the wrong idea that this isn't a good book or something like that. It's just that there's a very high bar, and by now there's a whole lot of material in this world, and when that's the case, people are going to have favorite moments or favorite elements of it, and so I don't want to nitpick it at this point, because this isn't a book review, and I'm talking about the larger body of work, and this is a welcome addition to the larger body of work. I'm on Terry Miles, the author, his email list, and he has said that he's presently working to bring Rabbits to the TV screen. And I think that's exciting. I watch very little TV, but I will very much make every effort to watch that, should that come to fruition. And I think it will. If he has the momentum of however many subscribers to the podcast, whatever the book sales are, well, I mean, they were good enough to at least get a second book, and hopefully this one does well. I think that'll be great. So to summarize what I like about Rabbits and why I'm recommending it, it really just comes down to that it is a lot of fun. The podcast uses its medium extremely well. The voice actors are great. I really like the music and the incidental sounds that play throughout it. And the story itself is excellent, is substantial. It really, really feels like a lot of work went into it. And there's no lack of ideas. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue early on. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's kind of by design because the main character, now I'm talking about season 1 of the podcast, is discovering this for herself. She doesn't know anything about the game, and so we learn about it along with her. But of course, as the story has progressed with the seasons of the podcast and the books, the author has chosen, I think wisely, to nail some specific things down and answer some questions. You just kind of have to, lest you just alienate people by there just always being too much unknown. That would get frustrating. It's understandable in the beginning, but I agree with kind of picking a lane with certain things. Anytime that an author does something like that, the specific choices that are made are going to land with some people and maybe not with others. That's a risk you take, because playing it safe is going to get boring. Not everything in the entire series has worked for me, but by and large, I'm a huge fan, and I'm very much looking forward to anything that comes next. And nothing really has to. I can be satisfied with what we have, but there's going to be more. And I'm here for it, without a doubt. And so I would like to start to wrap things up. I think, well, I'm assuming in the future that the format of this is going to take shape, that things are going to get more organized, and I'll just get better at it. But I just have to start somewhere, and I'm starting here. I want this to be as interactive as possible, so I think at first I'm just really going to put this out on YouTube before I try to figure out the RSS feed audio podcast thing. I have no idea what to do for visuals, but for now, whatever you're seeing, and I have no idea what you're seeing at the time of this recording, that's where I'm at. By all means, engage with this, make comments, or send emails. It's chetairliner@gmail.com. That's CHET airliner @gmail.com. I will put a link in the description, I believe, or I intend to, with the music from this. If the music is at all interesting to you and you want to hear it or do anything with it, feel free. I'll put a Google Drive folder and I'll put the music in there. Again, check out Rabbit's podcast. You can Google it and you'll find the website. I think that's about it for now. So anyone who's listened to this entire thing, thank you for doing so. I welcome all feedback. Hopefully the levels are okay, the voice versus the music. My son's in the room making some noise. I'm not sure if that's picked up. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on a future episode. Bye-bye.